Okay, so I can just, if I need something, I can just text you, whatever. Okay, cool.
Good evening. Would you stand with me for the invocation and pledge of allegiance, please? Councilman Rogers.
Our God, our Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all the blessings you give to each and every one of us here. We pray that you'll be with us and guide us as we go about the business of the city and as we continue the budget process. We pray tonight that you'll be with Councilman Thornton, former councilman, and our economic development director at the passing of his mother-in-law. Be with our family and comfort them. We continue to pray for those serving the armed forces abroad and serving in harm's way. Be with them, guard them, protect them. These things we pray in Christ's name, and amen.
Amen. Councilman Bibby, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. We have 6 people who have signed up for the public forum this evening. So we will start. I will remind you all that because we have a large number this evening, we will be maintaining the 3-minute time limit. So 5-minute time limit. Okay. Mr. Wilson, you're first.
Can I get this turned on, please?
Adam.
Name's Lawrence Wilson, 1312 10th Street here in Vienna. Now, last week, I believe it was, there was some conversation over an insurance contract where the city could have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars on the coverage and instead chose to remain with Highmark. Well, I got to wandering around in some of my notes, and right here is the bid, the quote from Trustmark via their Star Mark subsidiary. Now, we paid $1,050 that, or I'm sorry, $1,050,000 that year for premiums. There's 4 plans here that were presented to the people in the city that year, to the city, to the Budget and Finance Committee, however you want to phrase it. The very best plan that the city could have took would have still saved the city $156,000 in premiums. That's the very best plan compared to what that we paid at Highmark. And as we go down, what I call the very worst of the plans, which is actually the best as far as saving money, the city would have saved in excess of $300,000. So it seems we don't really pursue competitive bidding or whoever we're supposed to be talking to out there as well as we could. Because to me, $300,000 is a lot of people's money. A lot of money. That's another block or 2 of streets. You want to pave them. And then something else came up, and I was hoping that someone here could answer that for me. I was going through our ending member listings for 2018, or yeah, for 7/31/2018, and on here is a gentleman by the name of Young, George Young, which I thought retired. He retired as police chief right around the first part of 2017. And another George Young that works for the city besides him? No. The question I had is he's on the insurance, and the city paid almost $1,200 in premiums for him for the parent and 1-child plan. But if he's retired, my understanding after chasing this stuff for years is that he had to pay half the premium. And I'm pretty comfortable half the premium for 1 person and a child does not come to $2,400. So how did he manage to stay on it after he retired? I think is a legitimate question at this particular financial arrangement. I'm not talking about as paying half his premium as a retiree. I'm talking the city as a one-in-the-one type of thing. Another thing I wish to speak about is there's been quite a bit of conversation over this deal with, well, I believe it's Airmat over in Ohio, and the fact there's a bunch of noise coming across the river to us, creating a lot of discontent. But what I've noticed also since about September, October, is there's so much more in the way of pollutants in the air. Now, in my home, we have a package unit, heating and cooling. And I've been watching the filters as they're filling up faster than they ever used to. I started catching this in September, October, and I changed one the end of December, and I've never seen a filter that dirty in all the years we've had this time of setup. And I had to change one again now 6 weeks later. And does anybody around here know if possibly Chemours / DuPont is putting stuff out in the air again? Or is it possibly coming across, from Ohio? Because that's is dangerous to us. I mean, the noise is bad enough, because that will gradually wear your psyche down and make a maniac out of you if you have to listen to that racket all the time. But those particles in the air are going to do a lot more damage to us than that noise. So I'd like to know if there's anything going on there. Thank you.
Greg Frazier.
Good evening. My name is Greg Frazier. I live at 1210 22nd Street here in Vienna. I have some questions going back to the first budget meeting. My questions concern data processing the IT budget for 2019 and 2020. When Mr. Clegg did his presentation, I didn't get the dollar amount of the raise he proposed for himself. Could you tell me that raise amount?
I cannot. If you ask your questions, Greg, I'll get your answers.
Okay. And also, I'd like to know the dollar amount of the proposed raise for the tech position. And I would like to know what the annual salary of the new proposed position of system administrator. And I would also like to know if council has approved the hiring of this position. And final question would be, does the approval of the 2019-2020 budget with the position of system administrator being funded, does that automatically approve of the position of system administrator?
It does not.
Has council approved the hiring?
It has not.
Why are we funding the position?
It hasn't been funded.
Well, if it goes through as
It's
proposed.
a wish. It's on the request list.
Thank you.
Henry?
Henry Sasson, 1307 Greenmont Hills Drive in Vienna. Reason I'm here is 2 weeks ago there was discussion about insurance, and Mike and Roger and you, Mayor Rapp, everyone was talking, and then last week same thing, but it was done in a point where members of the community couldn't say anything. So I'm going to try to bridge this thing a little bit to see if I can get the articulation that I think was trying to be said, so that way maybe we get a little bit of understanding here. That being, I believe what Mike was trying to say that one day is the city is like the business. It sets the rules and the guidelines that we're going to run. So you guys are management. That being the case, when it comes to the budget and or the insurance policy that you're going to use, you guys define the parameters up front. You guys ought to go through and say, this is what I want with regards to healthcare, if there's dental, if there's optical, and whatever. You want to gold plan, a bronze plan, and a silver plan for people that then pick from, you know, their different options. That ought to be set at a high level. And then from there, you can go out and outsource bids and say, this is what I want. Is that what you were getting at? Okay, Roger, was that what you guys were trying to explain, that there was still confusion out there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That's all I had.
Okay. Oh, Henry, I wanted to ask you a question. I noticed you've been walking up and down Grand Central a lot lately. Have you been down past 34th Street towards Neal School?
I walked from St. Michael's all the way to McDonald's and back.
Okay, that's a good, thank you. So last week we had a discussion about the streetscape improvements. In your journey between 34th and 23rd, did you happen to have any opinion of where we should start that project?
No, I didn't think about that one, but I will when I walk tomorrow, and I'll let you know. But you did bring up a good point, and this is something as the city we may want to pursue. There's a lot of cigarette butts on those sidewalks, and there's a lot of them around the bus stops. So I don't know if Easy Rider ought to install those little canisters that, the people that are waiting for a bus can dump it or whatever, because there's a lot of cigarette butts, and that only leads to another mess and stuff like that. So something that I don't know if the city ought to pursue with Easy Rider or not.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kim?
Good evening. My name's Kim Williams. I live on 49th Street in Vienna. And I'm glad we're having this insurance discussion again tonight. I think this is my 4th time up here, frequent flyer. But so last meeting, Mr. Elam had said he was asking for documents regarding the insurance committee. And, you know, the mayor said it was FOIA'd and there were minutes available. Oh, I was one of the people that FOIA'd those minutes and all the documents concerning the insurance committee. And so the mayor said, you know, hey, there's no secrets, we have minutes. And he was right. Here's the minutes, one sheet. We've had, this insurance committee's been around for at least 5 years. These are the minutes, one set from April 17th, 2018. That happened to be almost a month after the budget was approved in 2018. Mr. Elam also had a question about, you know, who makes the final decision regarding the insurance. And I think that's a very fundamental question. That's where we're getting at, like, about the transparency of this whole thing. So hopefully you did read the minutes that were provided, and because it says here that Amy Roberts moved upon recommendation of the Swindleman Agency to accept Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield renewal quote for the 2018-2019 fiscal year. Well, the problem with that is that the mayor said that the insurance committee has no authority, that they are strictly informative. So, but yet they moved to go ahead and accept the renewal policy. The mayor abstained, which is fine, but we have a situation with unelected people deciding the things that you need to decide. You're the elected body. You're the people that we went out and voted for. So, it was also brought up, you know, I think, once again, Mr. Elam had a question about, should we have an ordinance to kind of decide who needs to be deciding this stuff? Well, guess what? You do have an ordinance, 151.06. And it's been mentioned before that possibly that is a vague ordinance. I don't think it's very vague at all. And I'll just read the very short part of it, which is, the city and the employees shall, in the cost of the shall share in the cost of the premiums thereon. Employees hired after the date of this section, and the section's dated May 8th, 1997, so it's been around. Employees hired after the date of this section shall be enrolled in the group health plan designated by the city at the most cost-efficient policy. I don't think that's vague. I think that the intent of this is obvious. That council should be the ones who decide what the insurance is. So what I'm asking for, what I'm proposing, is that you guys operate in regular order, that maybe this needs to just go to budget and finance. let them make the recommendations to the committee of the whole or the council of the whole, okay, the full entire council. Provide all the documentation that Mr. Swindelman has and whatever discussion so the council can make a full judgment on it and a full appropriate decision on it. The other thing that this talks about is cost sharing, and I happened to get some more insurance documents, and there was a big question in there about cost sharing in some of the years, and it was very confusing. And one of the things from like 2015, 2016, it said the city paid 100% of the premiums and that the employees didn't pay anything except for retired employees who paid 50%. So, and I understand now that employees do pay a percentage of the cost sharing, but this is so just, it's murky as all can be. So possibly maybe what this body should consider is actually having a resolution to define what that cost sharing is, whether it's going to be a percentage of the premiums or like it is now where it's, you know, where singles pay $99.50 or, you know, and $125 for families. And the point of that ordinance is there's accountability there, because if you have to go and change that cost sharing for whatever reason, then you have to bring it up before the council and before the public so that we know as the citizens of Vienna what's going on with this. And maybe it seems like making a big deal out of this health insurance thing is like being blown out of proportion, but it's 15% of the budget, and the council doesn't seem to really understand what's going on with it. And that's where I'm getting at. That there needs to be transparency. We need to know what's going on. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Brenda Powell.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Powell. I live on 31st Street here in Vienna. And actually, I wanted to come before council with a few questions, if I could, from the public. Actually, with one individual, they're concerned about having sidewalks on 23rd Street in Vienna, here in Vienna. They're talking about the hill being dangerous for drivers and pedestrians, that they can't see traffic coming at the top of the hill. And many drivers, she says, that come over the hill way too fast, and they end up having to go over into the grass in order to get away from the vehicles. That's something that was talked about. It's just more or less a wish, not a complaining, but just a, you know, it's a dangerous situation. Something that had been mentioned to me has to deal with Parkersburg and the fact that they have a 50-50 type thing set up to where that if say residents want to have, you know, concrete sidewalks, that they can, the city will work, you know, with them, and that, you know, like a block area or whatever, that they can actually do a 50-50. City pay 50%, they pay for 50%. So it's something to just put out there with in dealing with cost. So I didn't know whether or not that might be something that would be considered. Another thing is getting back to the noise that we just discussed a little bit ago. There was an individual that actually commented about the noise and wanted to know if there's been any update on that in regards to it, if you have anything.
I do.
Okay, would you at some point share it with us?
When you finish.
Okay. The other thing is traffic lights. There's an issue with the traffic lights from 28th Street down to Walmart, where it has to deal with the turning lanes, and that individuals, it actually happened to me about 8 o'clock last night. All of a sudden, the light comes on to turn, but there's nobody there to turn. And one side of the, one side has a red light, the other side doesn't, but there's nobody in the turning lane. I guess it happens to people going to work early in the morning, and they are having issues being tied up between the lights with those leading arrows. So I did call the Department of Highways with the traffic lights, and they said that the city can actually take care of that. They came up and tried to look at it and see what they could, and they couldn't catch it doing that. So it might be just at certain hours, but say, you know, this individual is like at 6 o'clock in the morning, and like I said, it caught me about 8 o'clock at night on 28th Street, that just all of a sudden the light changed and there was a leading light, but there wasn't any vehicle to turn. So I wanted to bring that to your attention to help people when they're going to work and stuff not get caught in that kind of, you know, delayed to getting to work. Another thing I wanted to bring up was the streetscape grant. I haven't heard anything about it being discussed on how long this grant, how long you've got to fulfill this situation as far as what you're wanting to do in the sidewalks between 34th to 23rd. You know, how long is it going to take, you know, for this to transpire, you know, as, you know, the time frame, because that's never really been discussed. Another issue was the sidewalks from, and it has been discussed about that too, 23rd Street to 30th, or no, excuse me, not 23rd, 28th Street to 30th. That because of the sidewalks being the steps up and a high curb and things of that sort, that possibly those areas on both sides of the street should be actually ones that should be considered maybe first if you're going to do anything. And I thought probably, you know, you would want to consider that first. The thing is that we have the tree and beautification, and we pay so much money for to beautify Vienna. As they come in to see Vienna, all of the baskets and the planters and all of the things that we have, we don't have a sign, even at the end of Vienna, even in the medium or anything that says "Welcome to Vienna." We don't have, you know, anything on the internet. I've looked everywhere on the internet, even on the city page for Vienna, showing some of the beautification as far as when you're coming into Vienna to see the flowers and the things. There's nothing there. And so I thought maybe, you know, that could be something that would be addressed, that update also the city website, because there's not a whole lot of stuff on there regarding, you know, what we have. So those are the only things that I have for this evening.
Okay, so I need to ask you, what traffic light did you say, 28th Street or where?
28th Street caught me last night about 8 o'clock. But it's from 28th Street clear down to Walmart, that area.
So you're
there.
saying all the leading arrows are working?
They're working, they're just, all of a sudden, they will just switch. And
Okay.
one side of the street has a red light, the other side, on the other side of the 4-lane, it's got a green light.
Okay.
And it's got a leading light.
All right, so
So
we'll
if you
take a look
don't
at that.
mind to see if you could check on that for people.
Yes,
I
that's no
appreciate it.
problem.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
don't run off.
Oh, okay.
Mayor, before you go on to that, at 46th Street, actually this was mentioned to me about a week ago, that yellow light, there's a guy that has a commercial vehicle, and he says that yellow light is so fast at 46th Street, and I think that's been mentioned before, that he catches it. He can't really, you know, he's driving a large vehicle, so you might add that to your list too. As
Yeah,
inquiry.
that one's been on there as number one because people run that red light all the time. And I think it's a timing issue if things slow the yellow light down. But at any rate, the streetscape timeline, they've only done 30% of the engineering on that. We still have to wait till we get a 90% design review, and it's not going to be fast. These projects move through the state process so slowly. I know that Williamstown did a sidewalk project. I don't know, it's completed now, but it took 5 years. Okay, it just does not move fast. These things are just, but you know, they award you the money and then you wait. So it'll be a while, all right? But we have to continue to do our part of that. So it's not going to happen. I'm almost positive it won't happen in the next year. But
Well, I was curious about that because nothing
It
had
is.
been said about how long it would take. And I didn't know whether it was something that could be budgeted out to where it wouldn't be such a large amount of money at the time.
Right. So at any rate, we don't have the timeline on that. No one does. All right?
I was just curious because
Right.
nothing was said.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
Let me answer your last question because I would like to, I would like to do this.
Okay.
I've had lots of inquiries and complaints regarding the noise that you hear at night. So I spoke with one of the main engineers over there, and we had a meeting about 3 weeks ago with the plant manager, the Washington County Commission, the Wood County Commission, and myself. And there was a study done. They brought in acoustic engineers from Dayton, Ohio, and they literally tracked the sound. Every sound has a signature, and by following that signature, you can tell where the sound is coming from. And so 6 months ago, when AirMet's probably been 8 months ago now, but when AirMet installed the 2 new blowers to take out the particulates that were being put out in the atmosphere, the blowers increased the sound. And so after they got done with their testing, they got approval from upper management, and they're now going to build a sound deadening box over the blowers. So they've got 3 companies now that have been sought out for bids. They're waiting on the bids to come back. Once the bids come back and they pick the contractor that they want to use, then they're going to start on the actual production and installation of the sound deadening equipment to take that noise away. It's going to take approximately 15 weeks in order to construct the box over the blowers. So best guess estimate, by early summer, that noise should be gone or dramatically reduced. So that's the timeline that we're looking at for that. They are aware of it. They are working to fix it, and that's the timeline that they gave me. Okay?
I appreciate it, and I know that the public does too. You know, they've been concerned about it, but thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Daryl? Bud?
My name's Daryl Nonamaker. I live at 31st Street in Vienna. A while back, been several months ago, Mr. Connolly asked you all to close Spencer Landing down until we found out what was down there. But just this past week, there's a ball team from either college or high school, which I wanted to say Mr. All said that there was at least 50 people there on the field playing. But we don't know what's down there. You all say it's safe, but we had never had a report on what's there. And every day I drive down by there, and there's people walking around out there, running their dogs, but we still don't know what's in the ground. You all not telling us. You say you haven't got the reports back yet. I think that we need to close it off, the grass area, until we find out what's going on down there. That's all I've got to say.
All right, thank you. Tomorrow is March the 1st, and tomorrow marks the 100th anniversary of the Parkersburg Rotary Club. The Parkersburg Rotary Club is probably one of the most long-standing service clubs in our area, and through their Sour Mash golf tournament, they have provided many scholarships and benefited a lot of the organizations in our community that help all of our citizens. So at this time, I would like to read a proclamation to celebrate the 100 years of service for the Parkersburg Rotary Club. The Wood County Rotary Club, which meets at the Parkersburg Country Club in Vienna, is a spin-off of the Parkersburg Country Club. So the members there came from the Parkersburg Rotary Club, and we now have 2 Rotary Clubs in our area. Whereas Rotary is an international organization of over 1.2 million diverse members with a shared vision to unite people to take action for a better world, and whereas the motto of Rotary is service above self, and whereas Rotary's 6 focus areas of service are peace and conflict prevention and resolution, disease prevention and treatment, water and sanitation, maternal and child health, basic education and literacy, and economic and community development. And whereas John Marshall, a local attorney of law who would later become Deputy Attorney General of the United States, was the one leading the effort, and whereas the Rotary Club of Parkersburg received its charter on March the 1st, 1919, only 14 years after the club was formed in Chicago, Illinois. And whereas, having reached its 100th year of service in the community, the Rotary Club of Parkersburg prepares to embark on its next 100 years of service. Now, therefore, I, Randall C. Rapp, the mayor of the city of Vienna, do hereby proclaim the year 2019 as the celebration of 100 years of Rotary in the city of Parkersburg. In witness thereof, I have hereunder set my hand and caused the official seal of the city of Vienna to be affixed today. So congratulations to the Parkersburg Rotary Club. They truly are a fantastic organization, and I hope they have a lot more years of service to our community. I'd like to call to order this regular session of the Vienna City Council for February the 28th, 2015. Let the record reflect that I've taken roll, that all members of council are present, and having a quorum, we will proceed. The minutes from the special council meeting held on February the 21st, 2019 have been printed, posted, and circulated. Are there any corrections to the minutes? If there are no objections, then the minutes will stand approved as posted. The report of the treasurer will be given at our first regular council meeting in March. We have no unfinished business this evening, so we move on to new business. The only item that we have on our agenda this evening is the continued discussion of the employee health insurance plan. Mr. Mark Schwindeman has come again this evening to help answer some of the questions that have been talked about. So, Mark.
Thanks, Mayor Rapp. As Mayor Rapp indicated, I'm here to try to answer any questions that council has this evening concerning the process, and I'll just open it up to that. It probably is a good place to start.
One of mine, I know Roger had, my question, there's a big jump, and I don't know why it happened, between the 2011-2012 budget. I think the employees are paying 80% of everything, and I don't have these documents in front of me. And then the next year, it went to 100% coverage. I just didn't understand the big jump, why that decision was made, who made that decision, as far as to be going from 80% to the 100% fully coverage now. And that was one of my questions. And I appreciate you coming to ask these. I know there's been many questions to having you here, so thank you for coming and talking to us about this stuff. It is a big issue with our budget.
Sure, my pleasure. So the question was, I believe, regarding coverage, not that the employees were paying.
Right, yeah, this is a coverage question, yeah.
So let me describe the process. The Schwindeman Agency has been involved with the working with the health insurance and employee benefits at the city of Vienna. When we were asked to come in 2011, the plan design was a preferred provider plan design with a low deductible, $250 deductible, 80/20 coverage on co-insurance, Councilman Elam, as you just mentioned, with a certain dollar amount out of pocket, $1,250. We have employed over the past several years, first of all, over the past several years, that's been the plan design that we've been asked to try to replicate when we've gone out to the marketplace and out to bid. I'll reference total compensation a couple of times once again, as I did previously. So there's various ways to do that. One is to raise the deductible on the health insurance policy itself, which in 2000, I believe it was 2012, we suggested that to be done. And then supplement that with something called a health reimbursement arrangement. So at the end of the day, the out-of-pocket expense to the individual employee at time of claims throughout the year was the same, the $1,250. However, we were able to save a considerable amount of money in premium, and the corresponding cost of the health risk reimbursement arrangement was not nearly as much as if the city would have stayed with the existing policy with the lower deductible, 80/20 co-insurance and out-of-pocket maximum. We can certainly share any of that information. I think we've provided a lot of that through the FOIA request and also through council's request, but we'd be happy to share that information again. Simply put, the coverage was not increased. The coverage was rearranged so that the deductible in the health insurance policy had 100% coverage thereafter at a much higher deductible. Then supplementing that was a health reimbursement arrangement that the city funded to reimburse some of those claims costs to get the employees' out-of-pocket expense back to $1,250. So it was not an increase in coverage. It was a combination of the two plans that got back to the same effective benefits.
And Mark, let me ask, with respect to that reconfiguration, So if the HRA had not been put in place, we would have kept it at the 250 deductible, then that premium would have been an absolute fixed cost for the city.
Correct.
But with the implementation of the HRA, that helped offset just those employees who needed that medical coverage, and that expense was never incurred for those employees who did not, correct?
That
And
is
that
correct.
resulted in a significant savings in reconfiguring our policy that way. Because the HRA, the only reason that, I think it's what, 2750?
At the time, it was 2,000 because the deductible wasn't quite as high
Okay.
as it is today, 2750.
Right. So if you have an employee who doesn't use those services throughout the year, that HRA doesn't get paid out. Whereas if before, as we had it structured as a premium, regardless of whether it was used or not, it went out, correct?
That's a correct explanation. And every year thereafter, where the HRA was put into place, the cost to the city has been less than it would have been had the lower deductible plan remained in place. We use that structure in with a lot of our employer groups.
If you look at that 11 and 12 and the fact that it was 80-20, and so many of those things moved in the following year to 100%. And then you fast forward even to the year after that, substantial changes again of things that were added that were not there in the year 13. Now, isn't it a fair assumption to say that if you look at what we had in 11 and 12 with the $250 deductible, and then we went from an 80-20 policy to a basically 100% policy?
What year are you talking about, 2013?
I'm talking about the year 11-12, when we had a $250 deductible. And hopefully everybody's got these. I emailed them to everyone,
Thank
so
you.
I hope everybody has what I'm
do.
talking about. I don't understand how we didn't increase our coverage. We went from an 80-20 to 100% covered, but then we went to the reimbursement plan, which said the employee pays the first $250, and then the city pays the next $2,000. The $2,000 historically, up until now, which it's $2,750, is, I believe, around 9% of the monthly premium is about what that consists of in real true dollars as to what we pay out.
Correct.
So if you do the math, we went from an 80-20 coverage to 100% coverage. The premium didn't change much simply because we changed and started offsetting the $2,000. Had we not done that, it would have been an increase of probably $8,000 to $10,000. It's math, Jim.
Is that the question?
Where am I wrong?
Yeah. So the plan design that was in place previously was a low deductible, $250, 80-20 co-insurance of the next up to a certain amount. So the total out of pocket to the employee was $1,250. The premiums that were set on that plan on average would be about 15 to 17% higher than the high deductible health plan and 100% coverage thereafter. So the 9% estimate on the HRA is pretty accurate. It'll range, depending on the utilization year over year, anywhere from 9 to 11%. So quite frankly, the city has saved money with that arrangement as compared to being on the 80-20 arrangement all the way through there. The difference being is that the deductible went to a $3,000 deductible than 100%, rather than a $250 deductible in 80-20 throughout that extra $2,750 of cost. So definitely was a cost savings.
Mark, as Mr. Leach said, this is really a self-insurance factor that's in ours. If you allow that to be in there and an employee does not use that $2,750, the money didn't go anywhere.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, so what we were doing is, as the plan was designed, that you were allowing a certain level in there to where the city would self-insure itself and accept that risk, hoping that the employees wouldn't exceed that, and they did not.
That is correct.
My question would be, why would we not have done the HRA as we did, but left it at 80-20? which is the normal throughout the country. I mean, 80/20 is pretty much the standard policy that everybody has everywhere. Why didn't we stay at 80/20? I mean, who made that decision? Why didn't we stay at 80/20 and then?
Yeah, the administration, the HRA, could not be done at 80/20 by the companies that were administering it. So what we put in place then was the same out-of-pocket cost, front-end deductible being the same at $250, and the city picking up 100% for a period, for a portion of that deductible to, and then the employee having an exposure on the back end. The employee has, in today's arrangement, it's $250 deductible. The city pays $27.50 if indeed the employee has claims costs or the plan participant for a reimbursement. And then the individual's on the hook for another $1,000. So the out-of-pocket expense of the participant's the same. Was the reason for that, excuse me, councilman.
I'll take it.
Yeah, well, perhaps aspirations, right? The reason for that, Councilman Conley, thank you, was just because the administration could not be done on an 80/20 basis by the firm that was doing the administration of it.
So as we fast forward, if you go into, and I'm mentioning this because there's been such a huge discussion over the last several weeks, and it's very confusing. I'm going to just recap just a little bit, and some of this Kim has already alluded to. You know, and I'm only doing this to point out why it's confusing and why we need to fix it. Several months ago, Councilman Elam mentioned that, you know, I think maybe we should have an insurance committee, and actually volunteered to chair it. The mayor spoke up and said we do have that committee. It's the finance committee. Well, we fast forward to a couple months ago and we find out that there's a different committee that's supposedly been in effect since 2013, which consists of 11 employees on the city payroll and 3 folks from the Schwindeman agency. We're told that this committee makes recommendations to the council, and the council ultimately decides, which has never happened, other than we approve a budget which has that number in it, just like many, many other line items. Then last week we hear, well, yeah, we have that committee, but they have no approval, they have no authority, they're just there. And they're just there to transfer information on to the other people in the department. But yet the document plainly shows that that's where the approval came from a committee, and at that meeting was mayor, HR, finance director, recorder Smith, and 2 other city employees. Those people moved to accept it, seconded it, approved it unanimously with the mayor abstaining. So how are they just a letterhead? How are they just there? Somebody's making these decisions. And I say somebody's making these decisions, and that's why I'm bringing these up. And I'm certainly thankful that you're here to answer those questions. You had those changes that were made in 11-12 going into 13-14. You go into 14, you'll look at all the changes that was made, everything in yellow. There's lots of them, and it's all enhancements. Who made the decision? Who made the decision that we have the best of everything? I mean, folks, everything in network is covered 100%. I don't care what you're talking about, whether it's heart transplant or whether it's having a baby. It's 100%. Most of it, no deductibles. This is not the real world.
If I could just respond, most of it is with deductibles. The preventive care would not be covered, would be covered without deductibles. But the process is that the out-of-pocket cost did not get lessened to the individual throughout the time period of 2011 to 2018. It was just reconfigured with regards to a higher deductible, $3,000 back then, now $4,000. So the plan has a $4,000 deductible, then 100% coverage for most every aspect of the plan. Preventive care is covered at 100%. So then there's
But
the
they
HR.
only pay, I'm sorry, but they only pay the first $250, and then we pay the next $27.50, and then at the end they pay $1,000.
That's
the
correct.
deductible.
So the out-of-pocket expenses remained at $1,250, which it was back in 2011. If council or City of Vienna wants to change the construct of the policy, that's easy to do.
Well, we need to look at that. And I'm
Certainly.
speaking for myself. I mean, we have the current, I'm sorry, we have the current, and obviously we should look at that. But I'd also say, let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to this 11 and 12, which has got 80-20 that everybody else in the world has got. Let's go back to the 80-20. Let's forget about the HRA. Let's go with a $1,250 deductible, which is what they've got now, and see the comparison between the two. You know, then we've got something to look at to compare to. We get a number, but compared to what? I want to know what we compare it with.
Now, I have a comment too, Roger. So when Mr. Schwindeman came back on January 24th, he reviewed both what the city was doing up to the point that we retained the Schwindeman Agency to help us reconfigure our health insurance. Kim Williams has been here on multiple occasions talking about PEIA. Unfortunately, I don't know what the source of her information is, but based on some research I've done since she talked about it, she's not including everything that's involved, and I alluded to that before. That, for example, with respect to PEIA, you know, the county was with PEIA for a long time and played a hard time getting out of it, but did, and replaced it with Blue Cross, and for significant reasons. You just mentioned everything in this is pretty complex, and it is. But when we went back and we talked about this on January 24th, we talked about a total compensation plan for the city employees for Vienna, all right? You know, and for example, I've seen on your website for your business that you offer starting salaries for welders at $25 an hour.
No, that's the top end, not the
Okay,
start.
well, I'm just telling you what I read on your website, okay? And so the average hourly rate for city employees in Vienna over 71 employees is $17.72 an hour. We have one hourly employee that makes more than $25 an hour. Everybody else is under that. So when you're talking about total compensation plan and when you're talking about reconfiguring our health insurance, this has to factor into it as well. You know, we've resisted raises. We gave $1. We have a 35-cent longevity raise. And beyond that, everything has to be approved by council. And in this business of this, you know, going back to councils that we weren't even on and talking about what decisions they made, I don't know what bearing that has on running the city today. We're dealing with the information that we have that's being provided on these proposals to make a decision. As far as the transparency and this illusion that there's some conspiracy, I know I was certainly not a part of it, and I'm learning with you, and I offer health insurance. You know, I just had a surgery you know, on my back, and my out-of-pocket's $10,000, okay, before I get to anything, all right? And that's what private health insurance is like. But I make more than $17 an hour, okay? And so those are the choices that are between public and private employment. Those are the choices that you make when you're talking about total compensation. And when you look at the performance of the city of Vienna with respect to other cities around the state of West Virginia, and Henry, you know this as well, you know, and you can make your sides, but our city performs in the top 10%, always often in the top 5 cities in the state of West Virginia. And that doesn't just happen by accident. That happens by having dedicated department heads, long-serving employees who we need to retain. We've had these discussions about the police force and all of the competition there are for qualified officers. And so for us to, what is it you want to take away, Mike? What is it you want to take away, Roger? You want to take away, you want to make our employees pay more on health insurance? Well, then give them more on hourly rate. I mean, you can't look at it in a vacuum, and I absolutely have already said this on multiple occasions. I refuse to do that. So this conversation isn't just about health insurance. It's about the compensation for our 80 city employees who keep our city performing at a level in the top tier in the state of West Virginia, and that's the conversation as far as I'm concerned that we're having.
Mr. Leach, I'd like your assistance with something. You know, earlier this evening, Kim made the comment about budget and finance taking over the insurance program. The discussion that we've had is that's exactly what's going to happen. Budget and finance will be in charge of the insurance program now. We will do the discussions at budget and finance. All the department heads will come to this discussion, and obviously, since it's a open meeting, all of our budget and finance meetings are open. The public is invited to come and listen. The department heads will be able to ask questions, as all council members are invited to come, and they will be allowed to ask questions, make comments to the Budget and Finance Committee. Mr. Leach obviously is in charge of our Budget and Finance Committee. And if you've seen the agenda for next Tuesday's Budget and Finance meeting, the budget discussion is on there. Now, all of this is premature because we do not have any numbers yet or any comparisons for what is coming in this year's insurance package. So hopefully within the next week, we should have some information from the Schwendeman Agency as far as what agencies have been contacted, what proposals have been given. And at that point, Budget and Finance will review every one of those and discuss them in the course of the Budget and Finance meeting. So I have to agree with Mr. Leach. All of this discussion about the previous things that have been done, we go forward from here. All right? We take the suggestions, whatever council wants to do as far as customizing our insurance or whatever. If I came to you, Mark, and I said to you, our city budget's only going to allow us $800,000 this year, what would you say to me on that?
With regards to a plan design, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Oh, my goodness. We probably would be looking at a policy similar to what Mr. Councilman Leach described. A very high deductible, $7,000, $8,000. Matter of fact, the Affordable Care Act only allows you to go to roughly $7,900. So you may not even be able to construct a plan design that would hit that budget based on the experience of the city. But it'd be a very high deductible plan, perhaps $10,000 if it could be done.
And that's not feasible for us. It just won't work. Okay?
We can, if I could leave with this, and if there's more questions, be happy to stick around. If there are parameters that are put in place that the city would like to have us review and respond to.
For my own personal information, I would like to see what the comparison would be with this year's policy. With that as the deductible instead of the $250, compared to what you would have provided us without this information.
Mr. Conley, would you put that on the Elmo, please?
Sure. Excuse me, let me.
While you're looking at that, I have a question too. When the city of Vienna or any entity is looking for health insurance, all right, it's not like you're shopping for a car and everybody is going to offer you a Buick, a GMC. We are somewhat at the mercy of the limited insurers available in the state of West Virginia, and further limited in the insurers that are willing to bid on the city of Vienna's business based on our risk exposure. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. Plus, the other thing I would add to that, if everyone can hear me, is on a fully insured plan, which is what the city of Vienna is on, each insurance company has to file their plan of benefits with the State Department of Insurance. So very rarely will you have apples and apples comparisons among the various carriers that you can quote. The other thing I can tell you in the last 10 years, the number of insurance carriers in the state of West Virginia operating, the state of West Virginia has shrunk considerably. So the competition in the marketplace is not what it was previously. But to answer your question, Councilman Leach, you're exactly right.
And that's, I'll chime in here a little bit. And whatever becomes of this, I'm glad this discussion has happened because obviously the way the city insurance has been chosen, there's just been a black cloud around it, along with many other things in the city.
That's your characterization. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Jim,
but
this thing,
I'm sorry, Mike, but I absolutely disagree.
I didn't
with
interrupt
what
when
you're
you went
saying.
on your little
I
tangent
understand,
over there,
but-
Jim. Said you said
Well,
you don't want
yeah.
to talk about
Jim,
it, so
All right, I'll
shut your mouth.
respond when you're done.
Thank
you
you.
just said you didn't want to talk about it. I
Mike?
have the floor.
I got you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Rapp. So the whole thing, Mr. Leach, you're talking about what people make an hour. Well, the people making, you talk about the hourly rate, $17. Well, these people, and that's what I'm trying to get to, they shouldn't be paying the same thing that an $80,000 a year employees make, because we have those, and you know that. You've seen the numbers. We're charging the people mowing grass the same amount of insurance as we people who are the mayor or the economic developer or the streets and park, whatever. They're paying the same thing, and that's one of the things I wanted to address. You know, I think what's happening now is we've uncovered, you said, comes some conspiracy. I don't know why you use that word. There's no conspiracy. This is about the city being more transparent of how we're going to do this process. So now, from what I understand, the people who are going to choose the city insurances are Randy Rapp, mayor, Kathy Smith, recorder, and Jim Leach, who says yes to everything for Mayor Rapp. So those are three people who are going to who's going to choose our insurance.
Mike?
I'm still talking, right? I've said
Yeah,
nothing
but
wrong. I've said nothing wrong. I'm
you
going on
didn't
a
understand.
tangent because I'm bringing stuff up
Go ahead.
that's been
I
brought around
apologize.
for years.
Go right ahead.
This has been stuff like the insurance is one thing. There's many other things I'm gonna bring up the next couple of years. You got 2 more years than me, so I'm gonna bring it all up, and that's what I want to do because we are not transparent, and now we're ruffling feathers about this insurance stuff because it's been doing wrong. This, like Roger Conley said, we've had 4 different stories how it's chosen, and now you come up with a fifth choice, and that's what I'm talking about. I have no problem talking about this. And Jim, you said you didn't want to talk about it anymore, so don't talk about it anymore. You just said you don't want to talk about it, so don't talk about the insurance anymore. Let everybody else talk about it.
Jim, may I go before you, please?
Certainly.
Mike, obviously you don't understand how the structure
You
works.
always tell me that, Randy. Don't tell me I don't understand.
You
I'm
don't-
a
you don't
50-year-old
understand.
businessman that understands people in business. Don't
No.
tell me.
I'm
Don't
go-
tell me you're going to educate me. Don't tell me you don't understand. You always do that stuff. And you talk about how great our employees are. That's every time.
Are you finished?
No, I'm not. Yeah, that's
Then
the
I'll let
thing
you
you
go
go
back.
into.
I'll let you go back in just a moment. All right? So I will say this for council then to clarify it. Okay? The process that we will go so that it was more transparent for all department heads and all council members to be involved is the discussion for the selection of the insurance policy will take place through budget and finance. The reason why I said he did not understand, budget and finance does not make decisions. They make determinations of what will be recommended and forwarded to council for consideration, the same as every other bid that we do and every other budget revision that we do and every other purchase that requires like police cars and fire trucks and things like that. So budget and finance is simply the vehicle to get the information that we get from the Swindleman Agency out in front of the public and council in an orderly fashion where we can examine all the options that are available, and then it will be referred to council for action. So your statement about budget and finance making the decision is absolutely incorrect. And if I misspoke, please understand that the Budget and Finance Committee is nothing more than a review committee, and then it's forwarded to City Council for consideration. Now, did I say that right, Mike?
Is it so? You're forward City Council the one insurance plan that the budget and finance you, Leach, and Kathy have chosen. Now you're going to forward that to us.
That is incorrect.
Okay, good. Okay.
You will get every option that we get, but you will have a chance to ask questions, make discussion, whatever it is that you need in order to determine your decision. So the decision will not be made by us, but it will be done in public with all of the information that we receive from the Swindleman Agency.
I have to, and I
Excuse
want
me?
to clear.
Okay, Mr. Leach, I'm sorry, you were up next.
I've been up here standing for 10 minutes
Yeah, but
before you all
Roger, you have to
started.
wait your turn, sir.
I
Mr.
was
Leach?
up
I
here
just have
first.
3 quick points, Roger. Number 1, the only black cloud that I see is the aspersion that you've created in these proceedings. Number 2, you said people over 80,000. Do you realize our average department head salary is $54,000 a year, which is about $26 an hour. Most of these people have been here 30 years. So your $80,000 comment is misplaced. And number 3, your personal attacks of me and saying that I just agree with everything the mayor says. I think anyone that's known me for 30 years will tell you I make up my own mind. And just like I disagree with you, I disagree. And then finally, I said I'm not going to consider health insurance in a vacuum. I'm going to consider it only in a total compensation plan analysis for our city employees. So don't mischaracterize what I say. I'm done.
We gotta get your
Mr.
facts
Conley.
right, because
Before-
we do have people
Mr.
that get
Conley.
80,000 here.
Before I look at this, I want to, and I know you already answered it, I want to make sure I understand. Mike asked the question about the way things will be done with the insurance policy going forward with Budget and Finance Committee. I was on it. I've been to most of the meetings. That's not the way anything else works with Budget and Finance, so I want to make sure that the answer he got is absolutely 100% clear. If you open 3 bids at Budget and Finance, you send one forward as your recommendation as to whether it gets voted on or not. Now you're telling me, I want to make sure, you're telling me that every quote that the Swindleman Agencies receives will be all approved by the Budget and Finance Committee to be sent on to council as a whole for consideration.
That is correct, but if
Okay,
you
I
also
want to make
remember.
sure that's on record.
But yes, and that's fine, but if you also remember, with every bid that we receive, you are always told what that bid was. And this process is not the same because there are other factors to be considered. So the lowest bid is not always the best bid, but that will all be explained in detail by Mr. Schwendeman, all right?
That's fine.
And so, as with every other bid proposal that we get, all the bids will come, and the report that Mark typically gives us is he tells that we had 2 agencies that refused to submit, and here are the ones that we have, and then breaks it down by category, by policy, by whatever information is available. And yes, it will all be there.
Okay, and I'm responding just a little bit as I get into this. To you, what you said, Jim, what Mike says is correct. This has all been in a very, very black hole for years, to the point that none of us sitting on council had any idea. I know we can't change the past. I want to change the future going forward. That's why we're having this conversation, to figure out how we got to this point. How do we change what we've done, in my opinion, that is so very wrong? This, folks, that I'm talking about right here is the actual summary of coverage that the city of Vienna had back in the year 2012. This, to me, represents a real world policy. It's a fabulous policy, but it's your normal 80-20. It had a $250 deductible. That's phenomenal.
So what are you asking Mr. Schwendeman
I
to?
want to see what this would look like in today's world with a $1,250 deductible, which is what the employees currently have.
Do you understand what he's asking you for, Mark?
Just to be clear, what I would ask of City of Vienna, if we can get submitted in writing, as to what we're supposed to respond to, and that way we're absolutely assured of what we're responding to.
That's fine. No, that's fine. And I'll make sure that.
Am I making myself clear on what I'm asking for, though?
Well, let me just describe, to a certain extent, the 80-20 is characterized as, it's 80-20, the out-of-pocket expense is still $1,250, right? So the $1,250 deductible is analogous to the out-of-pocket expense, and I thought I answered that earlier, where when the question was raised that the actual overall cost to the city, the way it's being done right now, as compared to the 2011, 2012.
Yep.
Whichever time period that was, is actually less expensive than if we went back to that, but we'll answer that question.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Can I make a point of clarification?
Mr. Skogstad?
Briefly, and I'm not going to editorialize. Traditionally, what has happened with council is council generally has left the responsibility of figuring out what the details of the budget is to the finance director. The cost of the insurance was left to the responsibility of the insurance commission, or committee, or however you want to call it, which has no real authority in the city. It was just a group of people that were selected for whatever reason, typically because of their status as department heads, to try and help figure out a way to handle the insurance. And then they make a recommendation to council for council to approve. So the responsibility always falls with council. Any decision or any way that the city has conducted its business, whether council has asked questions or failed to ask questions, has requested information or has failed to ask for information at any point in any budget prior to this, is because council has not asked the question. You've always had the authority to ask these things. I guess sometimes part of that is you don't always know what you don't know, which I understand. But Budget and Finance has always been a recommending body. At one point in years past, Budget and Finance was not conducted under the Open Meetings Act. That was changed, and now it's agended and it's noticed and what have you. But it's always been a recommending body. At some point, I suspect it was used as a gatekeeping body so that, well, again, I'm not going to editorialize. But it always has made recommendations. So whenever council has a document that from the Budget and Finance Committee, it always says, if there is more than one bid or one bid that's been submitted, based upon the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Committee, they recommend the lowest bid. And typically that's because the law requires the lowest bid for most of the things that require bids. So all of the things that you're asking, you've always had the authority to ask. You've always had the ability to ask. And now you're exercising as a council your authority and your ability and taking on the responsibility of making decisions that will take more time and which is fine, but will take council taking the responsibility to make these decisions. So everything that you've asked for, you've always been able to do. Because a council as a body in whatever configuration has not done that, doesn't mean that the people that have been, I guess, forced to some degree to make decisions or to review things or given the responsibility of doing that, that they've done something bad or wrong or conducted it under cover of darkness or under cover of blackness or whatever. It's simply because the governing body has not asked to exercise their authority. That happens all of the time in the city of Vienna because the governing body meets twice a month and can't exercise every piece of authority to deal with every part of the day-to-day administration. So things still have to get done whether council knows to ask things or not. And I suspect that this is what has happened with the insurance is in the past, for whatever reason, council elected to choose insurance for the city employees in the fashion that it did, and it was chosen. And now council has simply done what it can do, which is to ask to choose insurance in a different way. Great. But I don't think it's, again, I don't want to editorialize too much.
Okay,
But
thank you.
So I'll stop.
Thank you.
Thanks.
But that's good, Russ. That's good. I'm glad you said that because, like I say before, this is the first year this is my third budget that I've ever seen. I'll see actual numbers before we vote on the budget. So we're taking that process, and that's the questions never been asked before, and now they are. So that was my main objective, just to be more transparent, and it's happened, and nothing against any other councilman, Mr. Leach. I have no problem with you. I have no problem with anyone here. It's just a discussion, but I think the way it's going to be done now is more transparent, and that was my whole objective. So, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any more questions for Mark? He hasn't been home yet today. I know he'd like to go home and eat dinner, so any more questions for Mark? Mark, thank you. We anxiously await your reports.
All right, thank you.
All right. Any other comments before we move on? All right, fine. That concludes our agenda for this evening, so we move to council comments.
Now, I'll start out with, I'm kind of disappointed that we're in budget season, and it relates back to transparency once again. We've had all the outside agency present, we've had the department heads present, but there's nothing on the agenda. So here's another thing I want to talk about, being more transparent. I know that, there's things in that budget, I want to give our police officers more money in the hour. I want to, but not give this person this or this person that. We need to have on the agenda. I mean, this is our budget, and we never talk about it. So please forward me on how we can start talking about individual things in the budget, because I know and this is me talking. This is my perception. We're way over the budget now, 1.9 million, whatever it was. But from what I understand in the past, Mayor, you send back to the department heads and say make cuts, and that's not efficient. I mean, that's because there's things that the Parks and Rec have that I want them to have. I'm the liaison, and to send it back to Steve Black and say, hey, cut this, this, and this, and have every department cut. I don't want anything cut from the police department. I want those police officers to have raises, but then to go back and tell Chief Pfeiffer you got to make cuts, we're over budget. I don't see how that's very effective as far as. Because obviously they've asked for these things, they want them, but just to have them, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, I'll be educated on this, but is that not how it happens now? And B, can we not put this on the agenda every week until the budget's gone?
You have the budget that was downloaded to you.
Right.
So you see that we're out of balance by $1.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so the department heads have requested several capital items, and things in their budget. So the fair way to do that, as has always been the policy here, is to send it back to the departments and say, here's what we're out. Now, look at your budget and prioritize what you really need. So if the police department comes back and says, hey, I really have to have those bulletproof vests, or the fire department comes back and says, our hoses are out of date, we have to have replacement hoses, those things obviously take priority when you start trying to figure out how you're going to spend your dollars. $1.9 million is a huge number, and it's going to take some major cuts in order to balance the budget. If they tell us what they need, then we obviously know, leave these in, and we'll look again to find out where we're going to be able to find this money that has to be cut, because we can't generate money. We're not like a business where you go out and say, okay, we're going to have a sale so we can increase our money. It doesn't work that way. We project what taxes and what revenue we get and hope that we attain those goals. But that's the reason why the departments always get an opportunity first to say, we can do without this for another year, all right? So that's how that works. Now, those numbers are back. Next Tuesday at Budget and Finance, we'll go through all of that process and we'll start to weed it out. Obviously, you're invited to every Budget and Finance meeting to listen to that discussion. That's the way it's always been done, because it's hard to make that kind of money up. If it was only out a couple $100,000, it would be different. 1.9 is a huge, huge difference. Okay? So that's, you have the budget as it stands now. Now, Amy's going to take the numbers that the department heads have removed from their requests. She'll subtract all that, and then that number right there is the number that we have to decide, are you going to fund this? Are you going to buy that? How does it work? And it's simply a choice of whatever this city council wants the city to have. Okay? I can give you an example. And so if you notice, we have some leeway. We can cut back on the number of streets that we pave. We reduce that number. But those are the things you have to look. What is it that you really feel is a priority for this city? Do you want new police cruisers? Do you want a pickleball court in the park? Do you want an improvement to the swimming pool? Those are the decisions that have to be made based on the revenue that we expect to get.
So at what point in time does council as a whole get involved in those decisions? After Budget and Finance has looked at it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm not really okay with that.
Well, I think one other comment to make
yet.
here.
I'm sorry, I'm not through yet. We're talking about a budget that we're all expected to vote on. Rick Stock, we're talking about, and I used the term last year, and I'm going to use it again. It's always been rubber stamped. It's never been something where council as a whole has been involved in from the beginning. I understand the department heads may initially have a wish list that would need to be pared down. But once that happens, council as a whole needs to decide where we need to go with the budget and what budget cuts need to be made, not a select few. We're all elected, all of us up here, to take care of the best interest of the citizens in Vienna. We don't do that sitting on the sideline.
And you obviously have the right at any time to request that funding be put back in for whatever particular projects you would like to see funded. That can be done at any time. So you need to pay attention to how the cuts are made, what the department heads have removed, because the requests that the department heads have made, they know their departments better than we do. They know what they need. All right? So you have the right at any time to say, I want to reduce this by $1,000, or I want to put an extra $1,000 in, or whatever the numbers are. Okay? You've always had that right. Okay?
I'm just saying we should all be part of the process.
And
I'm
you-
not
and
saying
you
I
will
want
be.
to cut anything. I'm not when we get the budget put in front of us and say, raise your hand. I don't want to be part of it like that. I want to be part of putting the budget together.
And you noticed on the next budget and finance meeting that that's when the budget pairing will start, and then we'll start weeding out what we have to do in order to make this thing balance.
And I bring that up because Councilman Elam is 100% right. Very disappointed myself. We're right in the middle of the budget, and that wasn't even worthy of being put on the agenda for discussion. So, you know, that's all I really have to say about
You do realize, of course, that we're still up in the air about home rule, that no decision has been made on home rule.
I'm very aware of that.
Okay, and so I had a conversation today with the Speaker of the House and explained to him that we have to submit our budget by March the 28th, and that this indecision is really causing us heartburn because we can't go forward unless we know where we're at with that. Our home rule revenue is $3.5 million out of a $9 million budget. So we're working our way to the best solution that we have, but there is an unknown factor as to whatever our revenues are going to be. So you have about as much information as we have at this point because we don't know where it's going to end up. All right? So Budget and Finance Tuesday, we'll start into it there. We'll look at the departments and what they've removed from their budget, and then we'll proceed.
I'm pretty fortunate in that at budget and finance meetings or whatever, I can usually break free and go. But, you know, those things are typically done through the day when a lot of these people are working and can't attend. If we're going to do a budget and finance meeting that's going to be focused on this agenda, on this budget, I should say, then we should be at least temporarily changing those to an evening when people have the freedom. Mike Elam to attend, Roger Bibby to attend, the folks in the audience that work. Some of them's not like me. I can just get up from my office and leave and say, I'll be back in a couple hours. You know, I'm very fortunate. Most people can't do that. And it's just not a good scenario.
You can ask Mr. Leach if he would like to reschedule or have an evening one. That's Mr. Leach is chairman. We'll see what his schedule looks like.
I mean, I'm certainly willing to work to accommodate anybody's schedule that we can, but I want to go back for a minute. So today, or at whatever point, this morning's when I saw it, the budget after the department heads submitted their requests for their budgets for the next fiscal year is in the Dropbox. All right, we're 1.9 out of balance. Everybody on this council has that in their Dropbox, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. So is there anything, and I just want to make sure I understand this, is there anything that would prevent anyone on this council to start offering opinions on this budget right now? I don't think we need to spend $135,000 on a pickleball. I don't think we need to buy that mini excavator. I don't think we need to rotate those 2 cruisers that the chief's requesting. I don't think we need to do that upgrade to the fire nozzle in the fire department. I want to cut this. I think I want to add this. And this goes to the health insurance too. If you got one vote, just like I do, just like everybody else up here does. You know, if you want to make a proposal to cut something, to add something, to change up the budget, there's no requirement that you wait for anything. Put your comments forward. You can email them to me. I'll bring them up. And and of course Russ is going to school me here.
Well, no,
but
I'm going to caution, but go ahead.
But I mean, I don't think there's anything within Russ telling us what, again, all these open meeting rules, sometimes I lose sight of that because they're foreign to all of us that are new on this. But I don't think there's anything that prevents us from making recommendations with respect to the budget we all have access to in the appropriate format.
Correct. You can make the recommendations in an open council as long as there's an item as long as there's a budget discussion item. You could forward those to any of your recommendations to Ms. Roberts, who's the finance director, for her to consider. I would really caution council members from discussing or passing the numbers back and forth, because once you hit a quorum, and an email chain can turn into a quorum pretty easily.
So would the appropriate path for that, all of us, any recommendations we want to make, just forward those to Amy to be put on the agenda for the budget and finance meeting? I mean, whatever the format is, but I know we have the opportunity right now to put in our input into this budget. We don't have to wait. There's got to be a vehicle to do that.
And one of the things that Ms. Roberts could do, so she doesn't have to prepare 42 different budgets or however many suggestions there are, is she prepares the general bare bones budget. Each of the council members brings their proposed changes before council as part of the budget approval process. They present their proposed changes to the rest of council. It's moved, voted on, and then decided from there. And the only tricky part in that is going to be how it's how we would agenda those items. But you can make, and I think you could probably do it just by bringing your list of suggested changes to council and make a motion when you're going through the budget approval process, a motion to amend whatever section or line item that it is. Present your suggested change in the form of a motion, you know, and go from there, just like you would through any other amendment process. And it would probably be easy for Amy to get your suggestions ahead of time so that she's able to prepare, or at least has an idea, and then bring your list before council whenever there's whenever the budget is brought before council to be approved.
And there will be as many Budget and Finance Committee meetings and City Council meetings that are necessary. We will have a budget, balanced budget, by March the 28th when it has to be submitted to the state. So it doesn't make any difference. We're gonna do this till we get done. So every committee, every council meeting from here on out, we'll have a budget discussion on the agenda because we have to finish this. All right?
And that's March when? When does it have to be?
28th.
The 28th?
I think we have to vote prior to that because she has to have enough time in order to get everything prepared and submit it by the deadline.
Yes, that is correct. It has to be to the state by the 28th.
Yeah.
And our next,
She has to have time to work on that.
I totally agree, but our next council meeting is the 14th.
As scheduled now.
Okay.
Our Budget and Finance is Tuesday.
Mhm.
All right? If we determine that we need another city council meeting, it'll be scheduled. We will get through this. We always have.
Well, and I'll go back to, and then I'm not gonna beat a dead horse, which is exactly why we should have had it on the agenda for some of these discussions tonight.
Anything else before we close?
No, my last thing about the city insurance, I don't want, like I say, we've talked about, I think we've hashed out, I think we have a good thing. I'd really like to see, because like I said, I'm just against the guy making $10 an hour paying the same thing as the guy paying $80,000 an hour, and we do have those employees, Jim. But my thing is, you know, I know I told you about how Parkersburg does it. They have many different options to choose from. So put that decision back on the employee. Hey, here's 3 options. This option is going to cost this. This option is going to option 2, option 3. Instead of this one flat policy, let the city employees choose what they want to pay as far as their insurance goes and the coverage they want to have. Give them an option instead of saying, here's your insurance. This is what you pay. I mean, it has to go back to, and for the city employees, and I know we have 81 of them, and I've spent time with every one of them, you know, not all of them, but a lot of them. But the thing about the city employees, they do have to have a choice of what they choose, you know, and right now they don't have that choice to choose what they want. I mean, this is your insurance, this is what you pay. And it needs to go back to a percentage. So every year, we don't have to have, okay, we're going to charge you this much this year. Make it a flat percentage. This is what your part's going to be 6%. So if it's 7% or 8% or the 10, 20, 25 that Parkersburg does with the different options. But so if we have that set in place, we're not going to worry about haggling. They're going to know the numbers they're going to pay. So we need to have a flat percentage for employees, what they're going to pay. So whether it goes down next year, they're going to pay less. If it goes up next year, it's going to pay more. So it needs to be some kind of percentage instead of this dollar amount, this flat dollar amount that we pay. And that's my recommendation, is go to a percentage for our insurance plans and let them have more than just one option.
Okay. Our next regular scheduled council meeting will be March the 14th at 7. It could be changed depending on what happens on Tuesday at Budget and Finance.
One more quick question before you hit the gavel there, Mayor, please. Now, update on Johns Manville, what's happening as far as down on the lower site?
Well, that's that's an agenda item. I will tell you that but I can give this update. Tuesday or Wednesday of next week is when Derek Hancock and Tom Rebar will be on site with what you mentioned last time is what's called an XRF. And what that is it's a field testing device that they actually rent because it's a very expensive piece of equipment. They're using it on the 3rd section, which is down by the oil and gas well, And the reason they're using that device as opposed to the soil sampling is so that if they take a sample and that sample's above the de minimis on arsenic, which is what we're looking for, then they don't have to turn around and take another sample. They can scan that area, and that's going to happen on Tuesday or Wednesday, and that's where we're working to get to where we can get our final work plan approved. They just have to have those readings.
And that piece of equipment basically defines the outside perimeter of the area that they need to remediate, is that correct?
Yeah, because say if they take, you know, 6 samples in this circle, and then they send them to the lab, and by the time they get them back and they find 2 of them are out of the parameter, then I got to come back and do it again. Whereas this, they can just keep scanning until they say, okay, we've got a good parameter, and we're done. Yeah, that's why they're using it.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, his thing's been messed
It
up.
has been.
You've been seeing it?
Did you give me this pen? Okay, that pen there was